Welcome to our webinar series for professionals.
Yeah, there you go. Thank God for this extra reminder. So anyway, welcome again, everyone. But yeah, we are recording and the recording will be shared next week. So you can, in the chat box, chat with each other. You can ask questions. I'll grab the relevant questions and then I'll do the Q&A at the end of this hormone party that we are gonna have. And then just before I introduce Carrie, I'm just going to remind you that we have this Nordic conference with DNA Life going on in Dubai from the dates are the 12th of May until the 14th of May, which is going to be 3 days where Carrie is on for one of the days and Helen is on for one of the other days, educating in genetics. And then we have a doctor, Dr. Walid. He will be lecturing on organic acids and mold toxicity. So it's going to be a really exciting event in Dubai with hopefully really nice weather. So join us if possible. That would be really, really nice to see you. But Carrie Jones, hormone goddess, naturopathic doctor, and you've been working for Precision Analytics with the Dutch test for almost 10 years. And then you changed ship a little bit and worked for another lab test company, but never really moved too far away from the hormones. And I think now you're on a different journey, but more about that later at some stage, I guess. So I will pass on the stage to you. So you may share your slides and I'll just mute myself and look after people and answer questions and what have you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you so much to Catherine, to Nordic, and to DNA Life, of course. I have the waiting room open, which is like playing a game, admitting everybody, but let me share my screen. Today, all right. Today, what I wanted to do was go over a sample report of a Dutch test because we have an hour. And I have found in teaching this many, many, many times over that a lot of people have just general questions. This is sort of the 101, the basic, the intro, where we're going to explain page by page little things that I look for. And then how do we tie in those DNA SNPs into it as well? So if you have never run a Dutch test before, or maybe you've only run one or two, or you're just looking to expand some of your clinical knowledge, I'm hoping this will be really quite helpful in the hour that we have. As Anne-Catherine said, in our 3-day long event in Dubai, I will have 6 to 7 hours where I will go much, much, much deeper into this, dial by dial, hormone by hormone, case studies, etc. But this hopefully will help you feel more comfortable as you're going over just the basics of a Dutch test. So I'm literally just have a report pulled up, and yours will look a little bit different because when you run through Nordic, it has the Nordic logo at the top. It's blue as opposed to this soft yellow green type color, but it is the same dials, the same hormones and what have you. The logos are just a little bit, are just very different. So when you're looking at the first page, a couple of things that I want everyone to pay attention to, because as we know, the people who are doing the Dutch test, they don't feel good. They feel hormonal, they're tired, they made a brain fog, they're moody, maybe they can't sleep. So on the very first page is called the summary page. And the reason it's called the summary page is because the owner of the Dutch test decided he wanted to give you a snapshot, a quick look at what you're viewing with your patient's hormones. This is a female sample report, but I will point out the differences when you come across a male report. They are really quite similar. But what you want to look in the upper right-hand corner where it says collection times, you were supposed to collect, if you were a female and you still cycle, you get a period, you are supposed to collect this test 5 to 7 days after ovulation if you ovulate. So if you have a 28-day cycle, ideally you will collect 5 to 7 days after ovulation. In general, we say somewhere between days 19, 20, and 21, or 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, somewhere in there is what we're looking for, that mid-luteal or luteal phase. So if they wrote down their last menstrual period, Dutch will print it here where it says last menstrual period. And it's really nice just to have a quick look there to make sure it lines up. Did they include their last period? And does it roughly sound, or the math, does it sound like it was at the appropriate time? Then you're going to look at the collection times, because it's amazing the number of times people will collect at any old time of the day that they want to. They will collect when they wake up, they'll collect, hours later, they'll forget, they'll collect over several days as opposed to a 24-hour time frame. On the Dutch test instructions, it does say to you do need to collect within the same 24 hours. You can collect starting at dinner and then bedtime, go to sleep, and then the next morning and 2 hours later. You can also collect starting in the morning. So for me right now, it is 7 a.m. in the morning where I live. And so if I was collecting the Dutch test today, I would have collected when I woke up. I would collect 2 hours later, same day, and then I would collect around dinner and before bed. So you just want to eyeball this, because sometimes you will get a very crazy cortisol, or you will get very crazy numbers, and you're thinking, oh, what is wrong with my client or my patient? And really they just collected at a crazy time. Or maybe they're a night shift worker, they're a nurse, and they work all night long, and you forgot that. So in their collection, they collected at their typical nighttime. So then we move down and we look at the dials. So Dutch has decided, instead of listing everything out, which is what it looks like when we get to page 2, just line, and I'll explain that. Dutch decided to put it into dials. So it looks like a gas gauge. So if your gas is low, it's on E or empty. If your gas is high, it's on full. Obviously, if you have an electric car, it doesn't really apply, but you understand what I mean. On the Dutch test, there are 2 stars. The stars are your upper and lower reference range for a cycling woman in the luteal phase. So for example, if you look in the very middle dial where it says progesterone 11.2, 6 is the lower end, 20 is the upper end. There is a little purple rectangular section that is the post-menopausal section. So if you or your client are post-menopausal, you have not had a period in 12 plus months, then you will be looking down in this bottom purple area. If she is on some sort of hormone replacement therapy, she is on estradiol, she is on progesterone, then you may find she's out of the purple box and higher, hedging towards the star, or maybe even above the star, depending how much hormone therapy she is on. So when you're looking at the dial, we just sort of look, are you close to E empty, or are you close to F full, or are you actually outright elevated for the estrogens and the progesterone? So the summary page is literally just a snapshot page of what's going on, but we're going to get into the detail so you can see. Now, when you move to page 2 are where you look at your progesterone metabolites, all of your estrogens and estrogen metabolites, androgens, DHEA, testosterone, and those metabolites. What Dutch also gives you are the luteal range, the postmenopausal range, just listed out for you. And at the bottom, they will give you the follicular range, the ovulatory range, and if she is on an oral progesterone. So let's pretend she did collect at the wrong part of her cycle. And you think to yourself, oh my gosh, she collected during her period. That's the wrong part of the cycle. We still will give you the ranges, because it doesn't mean the information on the Dutch test is wrong. It just means that you have to adjust in your head that it's a different part of her cycle. So the ranges on the dial won't be correct. You will have to flip to this page 2 and see. So not all is lost. You just have to adjust the ranges in your head or write them down that they have a different range. And remember, testosterone, cortisol, the organic acids, they don't change significantly depending on the part of the cycle. Now, of course, we know testosterone does tend to increase a little leading up to ovulation. Cortisol can increase a little bit leading up to ovulation, but it's not significant. You can really kind of test those at any part of the cycle. It's the estrogens and the progesterone we have to be very specific about. So let's take all that information and move it to page 3. So if you've ever seen a Dutch test, then you will see that on page 3, what they do is they Shrink this down so it will fit. There we go. And then I'll make it big again because I know this is hard to see. But I want you to just see the whole page so I can be very general. So on the left-hand side in the white are your androgens, DHEAS, testosterones. On the right-hand side in the gray, that's your progesterones and your estrogens. And so what
Carrie, we've lost sound. We can't hear you.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear
Okay.
you.
That's crazy.
Carry on, girl.
It auto muted. Let me try this again. I wonder if I got caught up in some of the waiting room folk. I'll keep an eye on that. Okay. All right, so we're going to start on the right-hand side. Progesterone. There we go. Oops. Progesterone. So on a Dutch test, you will not find progesterone as progesterone. So progesterone does not really come through the urine as plain progesterone. It comes through as its two metabolites. One is known as B or beta pregnanediol. One is A or alpha pregnanediol. So if you're looking in the upper right-hand side of this test, why is this important? Well, it's really important because the B side, the beta side, is the most abundant in the human body. Remember, men make progesterone too. They need progesterone as well. It's just they don't need as much, but the beta is the most abundant in the human body. The alpha, the A pregnanediol, is the calming, soothing, relaxing side of progesterone. Your alpha pregnanediol, when it continues to break down, becomes aloe, A-L-L-O, not like aloe the plant, but that you might use for a sunburn, but A-L-L-O, completely different. Aloe crosses up into your brain and stimulates your GABA, G-A-B-A, GABA A receptors. Very calming, very relaxing. So this is why, when you ovulate, if you make a lot of progesterone after ovulation, or you take progesterone, specifically a progesterone pill, or a progesterone, like a lozenge, something you can dissolve in your mouth, you will get that calming effect. This is why a lot of women, as they go into perimenopause or menopause, or women who don't ovulate, tend to report more anxiety. Maybe they never had anxiety and are feeling more anxious, or maybe they've been low-grade anxious, and now as they get older and can't make progesterone like they used to, they become more anxious. So if you have a person, or you yourself are saying, I don't know what's going on, this is so not fair, I used to sleep, I used to be calm, I never have had anxiety, or my anxiety wasn't like this, think about progesterone as one of the reasons. They're missing out on this A pregnanediol. Now, if she has what's called, we call it here PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is sometimes described as a very severe form of PMS. When you have PMDD, they're not entirely sure why a woman would develop this. But one of the things they think is that with this A form, this alpha pregnanediol, when it crosses up into the brain, that she might actually have issues with her GABA receptors in her brain. So when the receptor, if it's trying to switch to think of like a key and a lock, you put the key in the lock and you turn it, and all inside the lock, things move up and down, and then the lock unlocks and you can go in the door. With a GABA receptor, when an aloe or when a GABA binds to it, the inside has to shift so that the body can go, okay, good, I'm going to make GABA and make them calm. With women who have that very severe PMDD, they think one of the reasons is they can't make the shifts very well. And so that ends up with depression or anxiety. They get the opposite reaction. So you will often find now for women with PMDD is that they're trying to actually lower lower the A, lower the alpha pregnenolone, or they're trying to make it constant or consistent, or they don't do well on maybe a progesterone pill, but they might do better on a progesterone cream. So you're gonna, you will, if you have patients who you suspect have this, either have been diagnosed or suspect have this severe PMDD, they may actually feel worse, not because alpha is the problem per se, but the receptor is the problem. And so they're trying to keep what's coming at the receptor consistent. And so by seeing this on the Dutch test, sometimes it's really nice to be able to say, wow, you don't make any of this alpha. No wonder you don't feel calm. No wonder you can't sleep. No wonder you feel anxious. Or if she has PMDD, you can say, oh my gosh, no wonder this is making your PMDD worse. You have so much alpha. So in this example, her alpha is 501. She has a lot of it. If she had PMDD, this could be making it worse. And so it's a nice dial to look at, especially if you yourself are not yet perimenopausal or menopausal. You want to keep an eye on this dial, because if you suddenly think, gosh, I'm getting more anxious, I'm not sleeping like I used to, and you redo it, you repeat this test, and you went from 501 down to 200, then you will know, like, you've lost that calming, soothing ability. So this whole progesterone section of the Dutch test can give you a lot of information. Then below that are your estrogens. So you have 3 estrogens. You have your estrone, you have your estradiol, and you have your estriol. In this example, this is a 46-year-old woman. And we know in 46-year-old women and perimenopausal women, their estrogen tends to bounce around. Unfortunately, it's not fair. It's not fun. It happens. So in this case, her estrogen is bounced down. I don't think she's down all the time at 46 years old, but it has bounced down on this one-day collection. But you can see on the estrone, her E1 is at 6, and it is pointing in the purple box. That is the post-menopausal range. Next to that, her estradiol is 1.5. It is pointing, it's just a little below the star. And then she makes very healthy levels of estriol at 9.6. Now, when you take this estrogen, it has to go through detoxification. So estrogen detoxification is a 2, if not 3-step process. And so Dutch shows you 2 of the stages. And this is where we get into the genetics. This is where it gets a lot more interesting as you lay the DNA estrogen over top of it, and you can see what's going on. So below estrone are 3 colored arrows. You have green, red, and blue. The reason that the blue is because really it should be gray. It's like gray area because, but the background is gray. So they couldn't put a gray arrow on a gray background, so they chose blue. So the blue is your CYP 3A4. Your CYP 3A4 helps push towards your 16. So when estrogen breaks down, you can become 16-OHE1. OH means hydroxy. You can be 4-OHE1, hydroxy. You can be 2-OHE1, depending which way your genetics or your lifestyle, your epigenetics are pushing you. Now, there are these colors for a reason. Green means good. It's the better pathway to go down. You want this pathway to be healthy. If you have your DNA estrogen in front of you, if you run that test, you're going to look at your CYP1A1. You're going to look and see what that is. The red pathway is your 1B1 pathway. If your genetics have a fast CYP1B1, you're more likely to make the 4 pathway. And this is where you can get into DNA damage and increase the risk for cancer. So if you already know in your genetics, you have a fast 1B1, this is something you are going to need to work on your entire life. You're going to need to work on ways to shift it over to the green pathway or to slow down the red pathway. So for example, supplements, common supplements that are used are indole 3-carbinol, I3C, or DIM, quercetin, I think you guys pronounce it quercetin. It's often used for allergies, but it's a blocker. It blocks this 1B1 pathway. Resveratrol has been shown to be helpful to block this pathway. So just as some examples. Now, as you will see on the Dutch test, and you will see on your DNA life tests, if you continue down that red pathway, you will see it becomes something called a quinone with a Q. Quinone, it's still on the red pathway. We do not like this. And if you can save yourself by supporting glutathione. Now, what if you have a GST deletion? You can see that on your report. One of the other things that the Dutch test doesn't show, but is on the DNA test, is your quinone reductase. That's your NQO1, NQO1. So by supporting glutathione, by supporting your NQO1, you can help get yourself back on the green pathway. So how do you support glutathione? Of course, you can give glutathione. You can use N-acetylcysteine, NAC or NAC. You can use the cofactors for glutathione, such as selenium, riboflavin, which is B2. What's the other big one? NAD can be really helpful, of course, for helping glutathione recycle. It is when glutathione binds up a reactive oxygen species, and you've got hydrogen peroxide, and you need to make everybody neutral again. That's where selenium and riboflavin come into play. For quinone reductase, that's when we use things such as sulforaphane, which is, of course, Brocalox, which is one of my favorites, because that sulforaphane, Brocalox, helps to upregulate hundreds of phase 2 enzymes. The quinone reductase is one of them. COMT is another one. So there's really great, and let's say somebody says, well, I can't, financially that doesn't fit in my budget. What can I do? They grow broccoli seeds, broccoli sprouts. So if they are a gardener or even in their home, they want to grow broccoli sprouts. That's another really helpful option as well. So when you're looking at the Dutch test and you're looking at the DNA life, you can overlay what are they doing. Now back at the top, the blue pathway is your CYP3A4. That goes to make your 16 pathway. Why is it blue? So it's good to grow things, bones. If you are going into menopause and you have healthy levels of 16, you're less likely to become osteoporotic. It's an estrogen metabolite. The problem is if you have breast cancer, it'll make it grow. So it's good for bones, bad for breast tissue sometimes. So it needs to stay in balance. However, as you will learn on your DNA life report, CYP3A4 is your superhighway. It helps you detoxify something like 70 or 80% of all the chemicals, all the hormones, and all the drugs and medications that come into your body. So I personally don't slow this pathway down. That would be like blocking a major street in your city to try to slow traffic. Then everybody gets mad, traffic gets mad. So instead, I want to open it more. I want to help improve detoxification. We want to take the pressure off the street. Let's remove the cars on the street. So now you're going to look, when you're, talking to them, as you do, I know you're already doing this, you're going to talk to them about what medications are you taking, prescribed or over the counter? What are the chemicals like in your life? What are the foods that you eat? What do you use as skincare? Do you have candles all over your house? What do you do when you garden? Do you use pesticides and herbicides? Do you live in the country and are surrounded by farmers who spray chemicals? Do you filter your water? So you're going to ask all these questions to help this one pathway. And you're going to take your DNA life report that shows you other ways you detoxify, because you've got whole sections on detoxification, and see how you can support that. Because 3A4 is just a small part of detoxification as a whole. And we're just talking about estrogen. Obviously, you can detoxify. It's a whole system, right? It's a whole process. So once you get through this section, we have to go in the lower left-hand corner, which I will rise up here. So we have to go in the lower left-hand corner because we have to neutralize it. So when you go through detoxification, so first you metabolize it, and then you do something called you conjugate it, or neutralize, and make it water soluble. The whole goal of detoxification in hormones is so that you can eliminate it through your kidneys or eliminate it through your intestinal tract. So do you poop it out or do you pee it out? That's the whole goal of detoxification. So you can see COMT where it says methylation. You, of course, on your DNA report, you will check your COMT SNPs to see, are they fast? Are they slow? Or are they what we call the wild type, which is like kind of fast? And that will help you understand how do you process your estrogen. Plus, your COMT also processes dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine. So it plays a role in hormones and it plays a role in our neurotransmitters in our brain. So with estrogen, with methylation, we want to get from what's called a hydroxy with an H or OH to a methoxy. We want that methyl group on there. And so by seeing the Dutch test, you can see how efficient are they at methylation. And by using your DNA life report, you can see, are they fast, slow, or are they kind of fast? And how do you work with that? Because the great thing, a lot of people are slow or are doing things to slow themselves down. For example, gut infections. We can have microbiome imbalances that slow down our COMT. So you may be thinking, oh my gosh, I have slow COMT, or my client has slow COMT, and they have all sorts of GI problems, gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, whatever it is. So now you know if I address the gut, I will probably help their COMT function even better. So that's just one example of how it's nice to know what were they born with and how is it acting right now with that COMT. And we want to support COMT. We want the body to neutralize and make water soluble the estrogen. All right, back at the top, we have our androgens, DHEAS, and this example is 9, which is a very low number, unfortunately. When you put the S on, that is called sulfation. Putting the S on, you use your SULT, SULT SNP. So you can have a SULT SNP problem, or you can be doing things to slow down sulfation. Having a lot of inflammation will slow down sulfation. We know that inflammatory cytokines, an inflamed immune system, will stop the S from being put on. Can't put the S on very much. Where is DHEAS made? The DHEAS is 100% made in the adrenal glands. DHEA, no S, can be made in the ovaries or the adrenal glands in women. So DHEAS is 100% made in the adrenal glands. So when you see this, think adrenal glands, and if it's low, think, could they be inflamed? What's going on with the adrenal glands? And could they be inflamed? Am I working with inflammation? Below that is testosterone. On the Dutch test, the testosterone is known as biotestosterone, B-I-O, biotestosterone. What does that mean? So testosterone, if you drew bloods, you can have total testosterone, you can have free testosterone, you can have sex hormone binding globulin, which is what testosterone is bound to very, very strongly. And then you have testosterone that's bound to albumin, which is another protein carrier. And when it's bound to albumin, it like barely hangs on. It's like kind of hanging on. So the Dutch test testosterone is a combination of the free testosterone and testosterone knocked off or pulled off the albumin. So we call it, it's kind of bioavailable is really kind of what we call it. So it's a little bit different than when you get a blood draw. It shows you you're free and like the potential, because testosterone bound to albumin is really easy to get. Testosterone bound to SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin, is very tough to get. SHBG does not like to let go of testosterone. So if you did a blood draw in a man or a woman, and you're looking at a Dutch test, don't be surprised if the testosterone looks a little bit different, just because of that reason. It's all looking at testosterone, but just through different views, different angles. So just keep that in mind. So then it all breaks down, just like everything, it all breaks down and you become these other hormones. The one on the left starts with an E, edeocalanilone. The one on the right starts with an A, androsterone. I do not know who named these. They're terrible names. I would have named them something else. They're hard to say, they're awkward, but they do help give us an insight into, is this person an alpha, 5-alpha preference, or a beta, 5-beta preference? Why do we want to know this? Well, it started out in men. I will show you. I will come back up here. The 5-alpha DHT, dihydrotestosterone, is the very, very, very potent form of testosterone. It gets a lot of study in men for prostate cancer, for male pattern baldness, for hair loss. And so DHT has been studied for those things. Prostate cancer, as I said, is the big one. But in women, we don't get prostate cancer, but we can get hair loss. We can get female or male pattern hair loss. Female is when we lose it more at the crown, the top. Male is when we lose it more here in the temples. We can also get cystic acne. Men can get this too. The deep acne along our chin, jawline, and down our neck. Think of your PCOS or PCOS patient who has all the hair growth, hirsutism, the hair growth in places that they don't want. DHT can play a big role in that. And you will see it says 5-alpha DHT. There's an enzyme, 5-alpha reductase. So what Dutch did on page 3 is that they tell you the 5-alpha reductase activity. Do you lean high? And that's why you have hair loss and acne and PCOS, PCOS, or does it lean low? So the 5-alpha is on the right side, it'll lean that way. And if the answer is no, they may be in the middle or they may lean towards the beta side. So if somebody is a 5-alpha person, the two big lifestyle things that press this are inflammation, again, and high insulin. So think of your PCOS or PCOS patient who does have high insulin, they're hyperinsulinemic. That will push this enzyme, that will activate this enzyme. And of course, there are a lot of medications out there to help stop hair growth and to help clean up their skin that focus on this 5-alpha. We look at the 5-alpha and we think of things like saw palmetto. We think of things like stinging nettle root. We think of zinc. We think of reishi mushroom. Obviously, reishi mushroom, just make sure it's very good quality, good purity. Mushrooms have become very, very popular lately, which is for good reason. But obviously, not all companies are like Nordic and pay attention to the quality of what you're getting. So those are the more natural things we think of for somebody who has a 5-alpha preference. Address their inflammation, get their insulin into a normal, healthy range, but those supplements can be helpful. So now what we'll do is move to page 4. Page 4 tells you everything you need to know about your cortisol and cortisone, because we are about to get into the adrenal page. So one of the things I do like to point out on page 4 at the top are your creatinine levels. Oops. I guess it won't let me highlight all of them. Well, that's terrible. Here you go. So anyway, creatinine. So creatinine, of course, this is a urine test. So water, anything you drink, water, coffee, kombucha, tea, doesn't matter. Anything you drink will hydrate or will make your urine be less concentrated. So that's why on the Dutch test, in the instructions, it will say, please limit your fluid intake the day of collection. Because if you overhydrate yourself, and no matter what it is, water, tea, kombucha, coffee, then you're going to dilute your urine and it's going to be harder to find your hormone. So please, on that one day, this is why they have this marker here, is to show you, did you over dilute your urine? And sometimes I know some of you run these tests in the middle of summer and it's so hot outside and you're like, are you kidding me? I just need to drink a whole bunch of water, but it's the Dutch test day and you can't. So I'm like, one day of the year, just one day of the year, do not overhydrate. Do not drink your total typical amount of fluids. You have to restrict yourself. Otherwise, you've just paid for a test that you drink too much water, and now the results aren't going to be 100% accurate. So that's why I want to point this out on this page, is when people argue with you about, oh my gosh, I drink so much, I drink water and I have to restrict it for 1 day, just 1 day for the Dutch test. It is a urine test. You don't have a choice. You have to. All right. So now we move on to page 5, the adrenal page. So first and foremost, we have melatonin. Melatonin is my absolute most favorite antioxidant in the whole body. I know everybody likes glutathione for good reason. Glutathione is super important. My favorite is melatonin. I'll be honest, I think melatonin is stronger than glutathione. There is an amazing researcher on melatonin. He's been studying melatonin since the 1940s. His name is Dr. Russ Reiter, R-E-I-T-E-R, Dr. Russ Reiter. He's 86 years old. He takes 80 milligrams of melatonin a day. I about fell out of my chair when he told me that. I got to meet him last November at a conference. So melatonin is made in a few places. It's made in our pineal gland in our brain. And all the melatonin that circulates in the whole body comes from our pineal gland. The melatonin that we make in our GI tract and our enterochromaffin cells in our GI tract tend to stay there. And they stay there because they're needed there. Everything you breathe, drink, swallow, eat goes right down to your digestive tract. And so melatonin stays there to help combat whatever you happen to have eaten, drank, swallowed that you shouldn't have, or just didn't know it, bacterias and big foods and things like that. So all the melatonin in circulation tends to come from your brain. To make melatonin, it comes from serotonin, our antidepressant hormone. It is a 2-step process. There are 2 SNPs involved to make melatonin. One of the steps requires darkness. It is, as we all know, it is a light or dark. These are light or dark activated hormones, melatonin and cortisol. So to improve melatonin for you, sleep in complete darkness, which we say all the time. We tell our clients all the time, but sometimes we forget why. It's because the SNP to make melatonin is darkness activated. That's when it gets turned on. So sleep in darkness, and that will help melatonin. The melatonin in the gut is a little bit different, of course. According to Dr. Reiter, there is not a feedback loop for melatonin. If you take melatonin, I understand melatonin is not available over the counter in all countries like it is here in the United States. But if you get melatonin and you're taking melatonin and you think to yourself, if I take melatonin, my own melatonin production will stop. Dr. Reiter says that's not true. That's not how it works at all. So your melatonin production will not stop, which is good to know because that goes around the internet a lot. All right, next dial. Oh, I should then, if you take melatonin on the Dutch test, this marker will jump up to the thousands, So the Dutch test is a baseline melatonin only. Do not use the Dutch test to see if you're on the right amount of melatonin. It can't work like that. This will only tell you what your actual own melatonin production is. So if you want to know melatonin and they're on melatonin, they have to stop it for a couple days and then do the Dutch test. Okay, total DHEA production. This is from page 3. This is where they add together DHEA-S, EDO-calanolone, and androsterone together to give you an idea of DHEA as a whole. Why do they do that? Because DHEA-S is made in the adrenals. And this is the adrenal page. Below that, we have the metabolized cortisol. Metabolized cortisol tells me how much are you making and clearing through the liver every day. So this gives me an idea of, can you make cortisol in the first place? It also gives me an idea of your thyroid function. In order to metabolize cortisol, you have to have healthy levels of free T3. If you don't have healthy levels of free T3, you can't metabolize your cortisol. So if your metabolized cortisol starts to drop down, such as in this example, where it's 2,725, then I start to think, what is going on with her thyroid, because with low levels of T3, this starts to drop down. So then below that, we get a gauge that will tell us if they are leaning towards cortisone. And this is where it can get confusing sometimes, especially if you've been using saliva testing. Saliva doesn't look at cortisone. Cortisone is inactive. Blood work doesn't look at cortisone. It only looks at cortisol. Cortisone is inactive. So when the body turns you into cortisone to be inactive, it's actually telling you to be inactive. It's trying to slow you down. It's trying to tell you to rest and heal. And it is also protecting, you have certain receptors that cortisol likes to beat up. It's called a mineral corticoid receptor. So your mineral corticoid receptor deal with your saltwater balance. That's where your aldosterone should bind, but cortisol can bind there too. But it's not, that's like, it can bind there. It shouldn't bind there like it does. So when you have a lot of cortisol and it's beating up your mineral corticoid receptors, what happens? You have salt water balance issues. You feel puffy. You feel like you've got water retention. Your ankles are swollen. Your rings are tight. So the body's trying to protect you. And it says, you know what, cortisol, you're being a bully. I'm going to deactivate you to cortisone. And so you can see in this graph on the Dutch test, if the body is trying to do that for you. On the other hand, you may favor more cortisol. Cortisol is active. Cortisol is anti-inflammatory. Cortisol helps you fight infection. Cortisol helps give you glucose. It helps with the breakdown so you can make glucose. So if you're leaning towards cortisol, you're trying to fight a fight, either internally because you have an infection, or externally because of the stress in your life or stress that's going on. So this little gauge can help you see, is your cortisol being a bully and we're trying to turn it off, or do you need your cortisol to fight a fight? And then down below, Dutch draws it out for you. Daily free cortisol pattern. Oops, on the right. This is writing my little pen. So this is where Dutch graphs it out for you. The gray shaded area is where you or your client should be. So on waking, you'll start to make cortisol. Cortisol will go up, 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 because you have a cortisol awakening response. And then you go down, 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 so that you can go to sleep and melatonin can start to come up. As we know, cortisol is like the sun, melatonin is like the moon. They're opposite of each other. In this example, she's not doing too badly. She's the red line. So she comes up. She will probably report in the afternoon she crashes. Well, you can see afternoon. Her afternoon red point is right at the bottom. So she might say to you, man, in the afternoon, I get so tired. In the afternoon, I need sugar. In the afternoon, I get coffee or caffeine, or I need to take a nap. I'm not motivated in the afternoon. And so you can do things to help her and with her particular, what's going on with her in the afternoon. And then Dutch will give you the actual cortisol number, which is 111, right below it. On the left-hand side, they will graph out the cortisone, which is inactive. So Dutch does show you both, so you can get an idea of how much cortisone you have and how much cortisol you have. So the body always makes cortisol first, and then it determines keep it as cortisol or deactivate it. Do you need to be deactivated into cortisone? So if you have your own Dutch test in front of you and your left side, your cortisone side is a lot higher, are you taking care of yourself? What is going on? Because if your cortisone side is higher, that makes me think your body is trying to protect you. It's trying to get you to slow down, rest, and heal yourself when I see a lot of cortisone. When I see a lot of cortisol, then I think, what are you fighting? It's acute, it's recent, it's maybe an infection, or it's emotion, or like what and it could be for good things. Maybe you just got married and did a Dutch test. Maybe you just had a baby and did a Dutch test, right? Those things can be good stressors, but they will show up on the Dutch test. So always ask your client what's going on, what happened on the day of collection, because that'll give you some insight. And lastly, to wrap this up, we're going to talk about the organic acids. Now, of course, through Nordic, you can get a proper organic acid test, a multi-page organic acid test. Dutch is not trying to be an organic acid company, not like the big companies that are out there, but there are a few that are quite helpful for hormones. So let's go through them in our last bit here. So the first one is called MMA methylmalonate. If you use one of Nordic's other organic acid companies, they probably call it methylmalonic acid. It is the same thing. So Great Plains, which is now Mosaic, they change names. They use methylmalonic acid. Genova uses methylmalonate. So depending which company you use, Dutch uses methylmalonate. It's the same thing. What does this mean? As methylmalonate or methylmalonic acid goes up, B12 is going down, but not methyl B12, despite the name. It's adenylyl B12. It's the B12 that starts with an A, adenylyl B12. So methylmalonic acid and adenylyl B12 have to do with your Krebs cycle, not your methylation cycle. So if you see this starting to go up, think to yourself, uh-oh, mitochondrial problems, Krebs cycle problems. They need adenylyl B12. You could also use hydroxo, which starts with an H, hydroxo B12. So you only have two natural forms of B12, methyl and adenylyl. Then you have hydroxo. Hydroxo is considered natural in that it can convert into methyl or adenylyl. And then, of course, the fourth option is cyano with a C, cyanocobalamin, which does increase B12, but it does release a teeny tiny bit of cyanide that your body has to deal with, which has been deemed safe, heavily researched. My problem with cyanocobalamin and cyanide is that people come to us because they don't feel well. They're not doing well, and they're generally got a lot of toxins in them. Why would I make their body process a little bit of cyanide? So I stick to the other forms of B12, just as an FYI. But this test is adenylyl B12, not methyl. Methyl goes with COMT, the COMT page. Then it has some B6 markers. Again, I don't know who named these. We have kynurenate and xanthurenate. If you run Great Plains, which is again now called Mosaic, they will call it xanthurenic acid or kynurenic acid. So as these markers go up, you need B6. Your B6 is going down. And the active form of B6, of course, is P5P. So and B6 and B12, of course, are helpful for all things hormones. Then there's a biotin marker. Again, if this beta hydroxyisovalerate goes up, biotin is going down. And biotin is helpful, of course, for our hair, our skin, our nails, hormones type of things. People do the Dutch test for hair loss. Why am I losing hair? And it's another marker to help. Glutathione, pyroglutamate. Other companies call it pyroglutamic acid. When it's high or low, think glutathione is a problem. So this is nice to look and see if they have the GST deletion. This is nice to look and see if they're on the red pathway for estrogen. This is nice to look and see if they have NQO1, which is quinone reductase SNP issues. If you already know they've got infection and inflammation, like no wonder this is the body is using it. The body is using glutathione in that case, so you need to support them. There is a gut marker called indican. Indican, unlike the other markers, if indican's going up, it means gut dysbiosis is going up. This isn't an opposite thing. So as indican's going up, we call it putrefaction, which means like the microbiome, the digestive tract, there's dysbiosis, is having a hard time breaking things down. So maybe you then want to go do a stool test and see what's happening in the GI tract. Now the range, I will show you the range is 0 to 100. Don't wait until they hit 100 to worry about their GI tract. Once they hit about 70, 80, sometimes even 60, depending on their symptoms, I'm like, that's starting to get high. What's going on in your GI tract? That it's spilling over to the blood and into the urine and on the Dutch test. So by the time indican has hit the urine, that it's a whole pathway to get there, right? It's coming from the GI tract. So to get from the GI tract to the blood, to the kidney, to the Dutch test, start to really be suspicious if that number is starting to climb up there, even in the normal range. Or of course, they tell you they have symptoms. Then we get into HVA, homovinylate, VMA, vinylmandellate. These have to do with dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. However, They are very greatly tied to COMT, COMT, and MAO. So when you've got your DNA life test and you can see if they are fast or slow with COMT, fast or slow with MAO, and that will help you understand their dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. Do not look at these markers and think this is a direct measurement of dopamine or this is a direct measurement of norepinephrine. It is not. It is not, because let's pretend these markers are low. They're low markers. VMA is low, HVA is low. We're just pretending. Don't think, oh my gosh, they have low dopamine. They have low norepinephrine. They have low epinephrine. Look at your DNA report. Look at your DNA life report, because if their COMT is slow and or their MAO is slow, that means they can't break it down. So they may have a ton of it in their body freaking out, but they can't break it down. So it's going to show up low on the urine because they can't get it out. They can't break it down. So they may present to you with a lot of anxiety. And you're like, this is so weird. I don't know why you have anxiety, because HVA, in my example, is low and VMA is low. It's a SNP issue. You have to support those SNPs, COMT and MAO. And I give this example, my very best friend in the whole world, when she gets stressed out, her stress lasts forever. She feels buzzy. She feels anxious. And we can be together and have the same stress, and I'm over it. I'm like, oh, that was stressful. And then I'm over it and I move on. Whereas she has a very slow MAO. So her dopamine, her norepinephrine, her epinephrine are like in her body all the time. And her MAO is like, I don't want to break that down. So she can't. So hers will look low on a Dutch test, but really in her body, it's trying to get out. It's like trying to take the trash out. You can't. So that's where it gets helpful to look at your DNA life report. And then last three markers, quinolinate is a neuroinflammation. If you see this go high, be very concerned very quickly and work very hard to get it down. Once quinolinate, or other companies call it quinolinic acid, brain on fire. We do not want brain on fire because that leads to dementia, Alzheimer's, neurodegeneration. So if you start to see quinolinate go high, that's one of the first things you're going to fix right away. Whatever you can do to reduce inflammation, save their brain supportive supplements, detoxification. You do not want brain on fire. Don't damage their brain. Melatonin we talked about. And lastly, last but not least, is 8-OHDG, 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine. As this goes up, we start to notice oxidative stress, DNA damage. I need to get a better highlighter. So when you have DNA damage, which we don't like, it will spill out 8-OHDG into the urine. So immediately, why do they have oxidative stress? Infection, inflammation, God forbid, cancer. Do they have low antioxidants? What is their melatonin? What is their glutathione? What is their gut doing? Which thankfully, you have little sneak peeks into that. You can look at their quinolinate. You can look at their indican. You can look at their pyroglutamate. You can look at their melatonin. You've also got their whole history. So there's a lot. And how do you support this? It's all the same ways that you reduce oxidative stress. You're going to remove the issue, toxins, chemicals, support with antioxidants. And then based on the story, the symptoms, the history they told you, you're going to do additional blood work. Maybe you need to do some sort of imaging. Maybe you're going to do stool testing on them, further organic acid testing, sort of whichever direction you need to go as it relates to their 8-OHDG. So when I see an 8-OHDG elevated and or when I see an elevated quinolinate, those are my two scariest markers on the Dutch test, because they both mean serious damage is happening. And I don't like that. So even if somebody comes to me and says, I have PMS, but their quinolinate's high and their 8-OHDG is high, I'm like, whoo, I know you have PMS, but we have to save the brain and we have to save the DNA first, and then we'll address the PMS. And then that's it. The rest of the Dutch test is where they give you comments and an overview. They explain how to read the Dutch test if you are new to it. In the bold, That is specifically about your patient or client. So these comments do change depending on what your patient reports on their intake form. Actually, I should say, and Catherine, does Nordic give these? Do you give the comments? You do. Okay. So when you're looking at the bold, this is all about your specific client. So if you have ever flipped through the comments and thought, oh, they're very generic, they're the same every time, they're not. The bold are actually specifically about your person, what they say, what medications they're on, et cetera, et cetera. So there's many, many pages. And if you had more questions, I should show you on, where did it go? Patterns of cortisol. People ask me a lot about patterns of cortisol or in their organic acids. So if you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, that was so much information Carrie said about methylmalonate or B6 or biotin, they have sections of information in here. So what I'm saying, since I worked there for almost 10 years, a lot of this I was a part of, and I got to help put it in there. So it is in the back in the comment section. This particular report, obviously you all love Nordic and you go through Nordic laboratories. However, if you do go to dutchtest.com under the provider section, there are free resources. So if you would like to see this exact report, it is pulled from the dutchtest.com provider resources section. And that's it with 1 minute to spare.
Well done. Well done.
I know, right?
Exactly. And I have taken some notes of all the questions. Well,
Okay.
not all of them, but some of them.
Yes.
And I'm going to take us a little bit back from the beginning,
Yeah.
because pay attention to the instructions. A lab test is only as good as the instructions are followed. So both with liquid, but a question came up. So let's say you have a patient who collects on day 19, 20. And for some reason, instead of having a normal 28-day cycle that she normally would have, she has a 34-day cycle.
Oh, yeah.
Or shorter, or should we then what? Recollect or?
So, well, so if it's shorter, so let's pretend, so I have a couple options. If they collect on day, let's keep it really easy, day 19, like you said, and they package it up and mail it to you to mail it back, and their period starts that night or the next morning. As long as Dutch, my understanding is, as long as Dutch has not received the test, they have not put it on the instruments, you can cancel the test and get it and do it again. So if you got your, you know, this happens all the time. You do your Dutch test and like poof, your period starts the next day out of nowhere. And because depending where you are listening from or country you're in, it may take, you know, a couple days to get to the United States, depending on where it's all shipped. So if their period comes, they're like, oh my gosh, my period came like today and I just took the test 2 days ago. Dutch probably hasn't gotten it. You can call and cancel the test, recollect. Now, the opposite side, you collect on day 19 and you skip that month, or it comes day 35, or it comes day 40, and you're like, what the heck? I've never had a late period. What do I do now? So you can recollect. In that case, Dutch, you can't cancel it because by then Dutch has already gotten it and run it, so they won't let you cancel it. But the markers are accurate to the point that you collected on day 19, but your cycle came day 35 or day 40. So in that case, you have to read it as best you can, knowing that for whatever reason, you had a long period that cycle. So you are welcome to recollect. I don't believe Dutch will give you a discount on it because their period came late, but they will let you cancel and not charge as long as it's not on the instrument yet. Because they will just, if they get it in the mail, even from where, even like, let's say you're listening to this from Denmark or South Africa or Dubai, they just make a note. So when it shows up in FedEx or DHL or whatever, they just shred it.
And of course, that's the challenge when we are dealing with, well, perimenopausal women, of course, may have some issues like, and that moves into the next question. When you have a high E3, this was a case in one of the questions where the blue area is 82.5% in a perimenopausal woman. What would you read into that? Because sometimes the E3 is just high, and the rest is like low or normal.
So a couple things. In the United States, E3 is a very popular hormone replacement therapy. So here I always, and in the UK as well, estriol is commonly used vaginally because it's so good for vaginal dryness. And some people will do E1, E2, and E3 in their hormone replacement. We call it a triest. So that's my first question. Are they taking estriol in something and forgot about it? Second thing is, what you will see, it's the same enzyme CYP3A4 that pushes estriol. It's the same enzyme CYP3A4 that pushes 16, and then 16 becomes estriol. So it's just a big circle, and then this, so it goes up to make estriol. So then I start to think, is their CYP3A4 really upregulated and estriol has been caught in the process, because it is one of the many hormones that get made when CYP3A4 is upregulated. So on your DNA life report, you may show a fast CYP3A4, or you may have a lot going on, medications or toxins or exposures that have upregulated that enzyme, and estriol got caught in the process. I honestly don't worry that much. I know it freaks some people out. I don't worry that much when I see elevated levels of estriol, especially in a perimenopausal woman, because her estradiol is going, it's kind of it's going crazy. It's doing what it wants. And as a result, it's converting into estriol in like chunks, in batches. And so I don't worry that much in a perimenopausal woman when I see estriol, even if she's not on it. I just continue to focus on the rest of detoxification, ask her if she's on estriol at any of her products. Her face cream, by chance, does it have estriol? I'm noticing in the United States, more perimenopausal age face creams, you can add estriol in and don't have to put it so much on the label. And some people anti-age, it says estriol in it. So I check that, but it is the same enzyme that activates both. So what's going on with that enzyme?
Super. So just back to the, not that this is a question, but this is more like to all you practitioners out there. I do strongly recommend that you go into VMS and find Dutch Complete or Dutch Car and read the instructions. Not that I actually think you should start explaining the patient how you necessarily should, because they need to read it as well and make sure that they get it right, instead of just listening to you. But the instructions are in VMS under the test, and you can go in and look at them, read them, so at least you familiarize yourself with them. It's just nice to have that, because there is that, it's probably the longest instructions that we have.
It's a complicated, because it's a multi-step process, especially if you do the Dutch Plus, which includes the cortisol awakening response. You have to restrict fluids. It depends on your time of the cycle. We know perimenopausal women are all over the place. So in that case, you just do the best you can and know that estrogen and progesterone might be weird. Men are different. And so because hormones are hard. And so the instructions are in depth as well. Yeah.
Mm. So some questions are coming up on quercetin and how that's lowering COMT activity.
It does. Yep. So quercetin works great on the CYP1B1. I'm sorry, wrong enzyme. So it blocks the 1B1 pathway, but it will also slow down COMT, which is what we don't want. However, it depends on like anything, dose and how long you've been using it. And we know things that support COMT. So let's say you have them on quercetin for allergies or histamine, or for this estrogen CYP1B1, just put them on COMT support. Put them on the B vitamins, add in more choline, add in trimethylglycine, add in, zinc. There's a lot that goes into supporting COMT, so we can work the system, we can counter the quercetin part of COMT, work on their gut. You know what else slows down COMT, which is so unfortunate? Polyphenols. So think like tea. If you're a heavy tea drinker, especially a green tea, EGCG, so you may need to cut off your green tea at this time to support your COMT. I know it's not fair. I didn't design it. I'm just saying during this part, you might need to.
And someone asked, how do you support a slow mayo, just like with your friend? How do you
because
help her to quickly get out of that container?
yeah. How do you support a slow MAO? Oh my gosh.
Wait it out just a little bit in case you should get a hangover or something.
A lot of it is stress response. A lot of it is helping to push her into the parasympathetic. A lot of it's helping with cortisol. A lot of it is just supporting COMT. I'll be honest. I'm assuming, you test MAO because the MAO is not on the Dutch test. So that one sometimes.
DNA health test, and it's not in the estrogen either. We do have an MAO for a methylation, advanced methylation.
That's what it was. I was like, I saw it in something.
I'll just take a note of this and see if we should add it somewhere where
give the feedback. Would you tell those owners? Maybe.
So,
but you can support the other. If with MA, there is support for MAO that I'm completely blanking on. I feel terrible, but you can further support COMT and obviously all the calming thing. In her case, the calming things for the HPA axis proved to be very helpful because she needed her nervous system to be more parasympathetic or more of the calming adaptogens versus stimulating adaptogens on a regular basis.
So on that note, I think we're gonna finish for today. I know you all enjoyed it. I certainly did. So thank you, Carrie, very much. And
Always.
I hope to see you. I hope some of you that this increased your appetite to go and meet Carrie in Dubai in May. I know it always increases my appetite. And of course, if it's not possible at all and you haven't done the Dutch certification course that we have with Carrie, which is a 2-day recording of a education that she did in Helsinki at some stage. Yeah, long time ago. Everything is still relevant. So there's only some markers that has been added, mainly the organic acid markers that are. But then we have further online education. Hang on to the emails that we are sending out with both the Dubai event and then with the recording of this as well, because just going through this webinar, Carrie is a speed talker, so if she spoke like normal normally it would be a 2-hour webinar here, so you're getting you're getting double bang for your bucks.
And I tried to talk slowly today, but there's so much good clinical pearl information. I had to get it out.
That's why we love you. So you may have to play it again and put it on slow play so you can. Anyway, I love you for it, Carrie, for sure. Everyone, thank you very much. And we'll be in touch. There is a webinar again on the 24th of May. We'll send out invites on more like advanced neurotransmitter information. So I hope to see you then. Bye for now, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
In the world. Bye.
If you do not already have an account with us, please contact our team and we will assist you. If you found this webinar helpful, please like and subscribe to our channel.